The snow fell like a funeral shroud over the barren landscape, as Josephine Zander clutched her threadbare coat tighter around her thin frame, squinting through the blinding white. The stagecoach driver had abandoned her at the edge of Leadville, Colorado, claiming his horses couldn't push through the growing blizzard. Left alone with nothing but her single trunk, Josephine felt the first tendrils of panic as the wind howled around her, mocking the foolishness of a city girl from Boston who'd agreed to marry a stranger in this wild, unforgiving territory. "Should have stayed in Massachusetts, miss." The driver had called over the wind before urging his team away, leaving her alone as December 1878 brought the worst storm in recent memory to the mining town nestled in the Rocky Mountains. Josephine's fingers were numb as she tried to make out the crude map she'd been sent, the paper flapping violently in the wind. Her intended, a man named Walter Gregory, was supposed to meet her at the stagecoach stop, but there was no sign of another soul in the whiteout conditions. The town's buildings loomed as dark, indistinct shapes through the curtain of snow. "Hello," she called, her voice swallowed by the storm. "Mr. Gregory." The wind only howled in response, driving icy needles against her face. 22 years old and already a widow once before, Josephine had thought she'd known hardship when her first husband died of consumption back east, leaving her penniless. But standing alone in this frozen wasteland, she wondered if she might join him in death sooner than expected. As she took a tentative step forward, the snow suddenly shifted beneath her, and she sank to her knees with a cry. Her trunk tipped over, spilling precious books and the few mementos of her former life into the snow. Tears froze on her cheeks as she scrambled to gather her belongings, the wind tearing at her hat until it finally ripped free, disappearing into the white void. That was how Lucas Dawson found her on her knees in the snow, dark hair whipping around her pale face as she desperately stuffed a water-damaged Bible back into her trunk. "Madam," the deep voice cut through the howling wind. A tall figure materialized from the blizzard, leading a sturdy bay horse by the reins. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" Josephine looked up, blinking snowflakes from her lashes. The man before her was bundled in a heavy coat, a bandana pulled up to his eyes, which were a startling blue against his snow-dusted brows. "I'm waiting for Mr. Gregory," she called back, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. "Walter Gregory, I'm his bride." The man stilled, then cursed under his breath. He crouched beside her, and she could see now that he was young, perhaps 30, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. "Walter Gregory's dead, madam. Died in a mine collapse 3 weeks ago." The world seemed to tilt beneath Josephine. "Dead," she repeated numbly. "But I received his letter only last month. He sent money for my passage." Lucas Dawson's eyes softened with genuine regret. "News travels slow to the east. I'm sorry you came all this way for nothing. But right now, we need to get you somewhere warm before you freeze to death." He stood and began securing her trunk to his horse. "I'm Lucas Dawson. Own a ranch about 2 miles out. We need to move fast, this storm's only getting worse." "But the town," Josephine gestured toward the dim lights of Leadville. "Too far in these conditions. My place is closer." He extended a gloved hand. "Come on. I won't see a woman die in the snow on my conscience." Hesitating only briefly, Josephine took his hand. What choice did she have? She was alone in a strange territory with no prospects, no connections, and a dead fiancé who had never even been her husband. Lucas helped her onto his horse before climbing up behind her. His solid warmth at her back was the only comfort as they set off into the swirling white, leaving the town behind. Josephine closed her eyes, exhaustion and despair washing over her. "What's your name?" His voice rumbled close to her ear as they rode. "Josephine Zander," she replied, her voice small against the storm. "Well, Miss Zander, hold tight. We'll have you warm soon enough." The journey to Lucas Dawson's ranch passed in a blur of white and cold. Josephine drifted in and out of awareness, vaguely registering when they finally arrived at a sturdy log cabin nestled against a stand of pines. Lucas dismounted quickly and lifted her down, practically carrying her to the door. The cabin's interior was blessedly warm, a fire crackling in a stone hearth. Lucas settled Josephine in a chair before the fire while he tended to his horse and brought in her trunk. By the time he returned, stamping snow from his boots, she had regained enough sense to take in her surroundings. The cabin was simple but well built, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, a small table with 2 chairs and doors leading to what she presumed were bedrooms. "You live here alone?" she asked as he hung his coat on a peg. "Just me and my dog." He nodded toward a large black and white border collie that had emerged from one of the back rooms, eyeing Josephine with curious caution. "That's Scout." Lucas moved efficiently around the cabin, putting coffee on the stove and ladling stew from a pot kept warm at the edge of the hearth. He set a steaming bowl before her without ceremony. "Eat. You need warming from the inside out." Josephine didn't need to be told twice. She ate gratefully, the rich venison stew bringing life back to her frozen limbs. Only when she'd finished did the full weight of her situation truly hit her. "What am I to do now?" she whispered, more to herself than to Lucas. "I spent everything I had on passage here. I have nowhere to go, no one waiting for me." Lucas regarded her thoughtfully as he sipped his coffee. Leadville's no place for a woman alone. Especially not now, with half the mines closed for winter and men getting desperate. He ran a hand through his dark hair, revealing a streak of premature gray at his temple. "You can stay here until the storm passes. After that." He shrugged. "Maybe you can find work in town or passage back east." "I have nothing to go back to," Josephine said, her voice stronger now. She had not survived losing her parents to influenza and a husband to consumption only to be defeated by a blizzard and a dead fiancé. "I will find my way, Mr. Dawson. I always have." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I don't doubt it, Miss Zander." He rose and gestured to a door. "You can take my room for the night. I'll bunk out here." Josephine began to protest, but he waved her off. "I won't hear arguments. You've had a hard enough day." That night, as she lay beneath thick quilts in Lucas Dawson's bed, Josephine stared at the ceiling and listened to the wind howl outside. Tomorrow, she would need to formulate a plan. But tonight, she would simply be grateful to be alive. Morning brought no relief from the storm. If anything, the blizzard had intensified, snow piling against the windows and blocking the door. Lucas had to force it open, letting in a blast of frigid air as he went to tend to his animals. Josephine, having slept in her clothes, set about making breakfast from the supplies she found in his small pantry. "You didn't need to do that," Lucas said when he returned, stomping snow from his boots. "I insist on earning my keep, Mr. Dawson, however temporarily." Josephine set a plate of cornbread and bacon before him. "Besides, cooking is one skill I possess in abundance." Over breakfast, Lucas explained that they were likely to be snowbound for at least several days. Storms like this can last a week in these mountains. "The pass to town will be impassable until it clears." Josephine's heart sank. "I've become an unexpected burden to you." "I've weathered worse," he replied simply. Then, seeming to recognize her distress, he added, "Stay through spring at least." Winter's no time to be making new plans in Leadville. Come spring, the passes will clear, the mines will reopen, and you'll have options. Josephine stared at him. "Stay here in your home for months." There's a small cabin about 100 yards from here, Lucas explained. Used to belong to my partner before he moved on to California. It's nothing fancy, but it's sound. You'd have your privacy, and I could use the help around the place. He looked down, suddenly awkward. Running a ranch alone isn't easy, especially in winter. What sort of help? Josephine asked cautiously. Cooking mainly. Mending, maybe helping with the chickens and garden come spring. He looked up, his blue eyes direct. I'll pay you fair wages. Enough that by spring you can decide your own path, whether that's staying in Leadville or moving on. It was a generous offer, far more than she had any right to expect from a stranger. Still, Josephine hesitated. She had come west to be a wife, not a housekeeper, yet the alternative, being stranded penniless in a mining town in the dead of winter, was far worse. Why would you do this for me? She asked. You don't know anything about me. Lucas was quiet for a moment. I know what it's like to arrive somewhere with nothing but hope, only to have it snatched away. Something in his voice told Josephine there was more to that story, but he didn't elaborate. Besides, I meant what I said about needing help. I've been eating my own cooking for 2 years, and it's a miracle I haven't poisoned myself yet. A small smile tugged at Josephine's lips. Very well, Mr. Dawson. I accept your offer, at least until spring. And so Josephine Zander found herself stranded at the remote ranch of Lucas Dawson as December deepened and Christmas approached. For 3 days, the blizzard raged unabated, keeping them confined to the cabin. They established a cautious routine, Lucas tending to the animals in the barn, Josephine cooking and keeping the cabin in order. In the evenings, they sat before the fire, Josephine reading aloud from one of her salvaged books, while Lucas whittled or mended tack. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke, leaving behind a landscape transformed into a glittering white wilderness. The sun emerged, blindingly bright against the snow, and Lucas announced it was time to show Josephine to her new quarters. The partner's cabin was indeed small, just one room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed, a table with a single chair, and a few shelves. But it was clean and solid, and the windows looked out on a view of snow-covered mountains that took Josephine's breath away. It's not much, Lucas said, watching her reaction. It's perfect, she replied honestly. After sharing his cabin for days, the thought of her own space was welcome, however humble. Lucas helped her move her trunk into the cabin and showed her how to build and maintain a fire in the hearth. We'll need to stock you with firewood, he said, glancing around. And there's a pump just outside for water. It's heated from below so it doesn't freeze. Thank you, Mr. Dawson. You've shown me more kindness than I had any right to expect. Something shifted in his expression. Lucas. If we're to be neighbors for the winter, you might as well use my given name. Then you must call me Josephine, she replied. Or Josie. My friends called me Josie, before her life had collapsed around her, before she'd been forced to seek a husband by mail to avoid destitution. Before she'd arrived in Colorado to find that husband dead. Josie, Lucas repeated, as if trying out the sound of it. He nodded. It suits you. That evening, Josephine spent her first night alone in the small cabin. Despite the roaring fire, she felt the cold creep in, and not just from the winter air. She had been alone before, after Henry died, but never so completely isolated, so far from everything familiar. As she wrapped herself in quilts and listened to the wind whisper around the eaves, she wondered what spring would bring, and whether she would indeed find her place in this wild, beautiful land. The days settled into a pattern. Each morning, Josephine would rise at dawn, tend her fire, and then make the short walk through the snow to Lucas's main cabin. She would prepare breakfast, and they would eat together before Lucas went out to tend the cattle and horses he kept in the sheltered valley behind the ranch. Josephine would clean, bake bread, prepare the evening meal, and mend whatever needed fixing. In the afternoons, if weather permitted, Lucas would show her the workings of the ranch, the chicken coop, where a dozen hens provided eggs, the small barn where he kept his horses, the smokehouse where venison and beef hung in strips. Christmas approached, and with it came Josephine's first true test of her resilience in this new life. She had always loved the holiday, even after her parents and husband had passed. In Boston, she had decorated her tiny rented room with pine boughs and ribbons, attended church services, and exchanged small gifts with her neighbors. Here, in the isolated mountain ranch, she wondered if the day would pass unmarked. 2 days before Christmas, Lucas surprised her by returning from checking his trap lines with a small pine tree strapped to his horse. "Thought you might like to have this," he said gruffly, setting it up in a corner of the main cabin. Josephine's heart swelled with unexpected emotion. "It's perfect. Thank you." That evening, she fashioned ornaments from scraps of fabric, pine cones, and bits of ribbon she found among her possessions. Lucas watched her work with quiet curiosity, occasionally offering suggestions or helping her reach the higher branches. "Did you celebrate Christmas growing up?" she asked as they worked. Lucas was quiet for a moment. "My mother tried. She'd save for months to buy oranges or candy. My father," he shook his head. "He wasn't much for holidays, or family for that matter." There was a story there, but Josephine didn't press. She was learning that Lucas revealed himself in small moments, in the quiet spaces between words. Christmas Day dawned clear and bitterly cold. Josephine attended to her usual morning chores, then surprised Lucas with a special breakfast of Jonna cakes drizzled with precious maple syrup she'd been saving since leaving Boston. "I have something for you," she said when they had finished eating. She handed him a carefully wrapped package. Lucas looked genuinely startled. "You didn't need to do that, please. It's not much." He unwrapped the package to reveal a knitted scarf in deep blue wool. "I unraveled one of my old shawls," she explained. "The color, it matches your eyes." Lucas ran his fingers over the soft wool, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice rough. "I haven't received a Christmas gift since I was a boy." He rose and went to a trunk in the corner, returning with a small wooden box. "This is for you." Inside, Josephine found a pair of leather gloves lined with rabbit fur and beautifully crafted. "Lucas, these are exquisite. Made them myself," he admitted. "Your hands get red from the cold when you walk between the cabins. Thought these might help." It was a thoughtful gift, practical yet personal. Josephine tried them on, marveling at the perfect fit. "How did you know my size?" A slight flush colored his weathered cheeks. "Watched your hands when you cook. Got good at judging measurements over the years." The day passed in quiet companionship. They shared a dinner of roast venison and root vegetables, and Josephine read aloud from Dickens's A Christmas Carol by the light of the fire. As the evening drew to a close, Josephine realized she felt more at peace than she had in months. There was something about this place, about the simplicity of life here, that soothed her wounded spirit. Winter deepened, bringing January storms that sometimes kept Josephine confined to her cabin for days at a time. During these periods, Lucas would check on her morning and evening, bringing firewood and making sure she had everything she needed. On one such visit, as a particularly fierce storm raged outside, they found themselves talking late into the night, sheltered by the small cabin's sturdy walls. "Why did you come west?" Lucas asked as he stoked her fire. "Why become a mail-order bride?" Josephine considered the question. "Necessity at first," she admitted. "After Henry, my husband, died, I had few options. I worked as a seamstress, but the pay was barely enough for room and board." When I saw Walter's advertisement, she sighed. He seemed kind in his letters, lonely. He wrote about his home, about the mountains. It sounded beautiful. And now, do you regret coming? Strangely, no. Josephine looked out at the snow swirling past the window. Despite everything, I feel I was meant to come here. Perhaps not to marry Walter, but to find something else. Lucas nodded, his expression thoughtful. The West has a way of stripping you down to what matters. Some people can't bear that. Others find it's exactly what they needed. And you? What brought you here? His face closed briefly before he answered. Ran away from home at 16. Worked cattle drives in Texas. Tried my hand at mining in Nevada. Nothing stuck until I came to Colorado. Worked as a hand on a big ranch near Denver for years. Saved every penny. When I heard about this place, owner died without heirs, land going cheap, I took a chance. He gestured at the cabin around them. Been building it up ever since. Alone all this time. Had a partner for a while, Jim Morris. Good man, but the isolation got to him. Left for California gold fields 2 years ago. Lucas shrugged. Some folks aren't made for the quiet. And you are, thought I was. His blue eyes met hers briefly, not so sure anymore. The storm lasted 3 days, during which time Lucas checked on Josephine faithfully. When it finally broke, the world outside was transformed into a fairyland of ice-glazed trees and pristine snow. Lucas suggested they ride out to check on the cattle, and Josephine eagerly accepted, grateful for the chance to escape the confines of the cabins. Lucas saddled a gentle mare named Daisy for Josephine, showing her how to mount and hold the reins. Though she had ridden occasionally in Boston, the Western saddle was unfamiliar, and she felt precarious at first. Relax, Lucas advised, adjusting her posture. Daisy knows what she's doing, even if you don't. They rode through snow-filled meadows, Lucas pointing out landmarks and explaining the boundaries of his land. The cattle, hardy Herefords with thick winter coats, clustered in protected draws where the snow was thinner and dried grass could still be found. They're beautiful, Josephine said, watching the red and white animals move against the snowy backdrop. They're my future, Lucas replied. Started with just 10 head, now I've got nearly 100. By next year, I hope to double that. You've built something remarkable here, Josephine said sincerely. You should be proud. Lucas looked at her for a long moment. Thank you. Sometimes it's hard to see it when you're in the middle of the work. As they turned back toward the ranch, the sun emerged from behind the clouds, turning the snow into a field of diamonds. Josephine caught her breath at the beauty of it. I never imagined such a place existed, she said softly. Lucas smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. That's why I stay. Even on the hardest days, this land has a way of reminding you why it's worth it. Riding back, Josephine found herself studying Lucas Dawson with new eyes. He was not a conventionally handsome man. His face was too weathered, his hands too work-roughened. But there was a quiet strength to him, a steadiness that she found increasingly appealing. He was a man who kept his promises, who faced each day with the same determined resolve, who had carved a life out of this wild country through sheer force of will. That night, as she lay in her bed listening to the coyotes sing in the distance, Josephine acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding. She was beginning to care for Lucas Dawson far more than was wise for a woman whose stay was temporary. Spring would come, and with it, decisions would need to be made. But for now, she allowed herself to drift into dreams where the future wasn't quite so uncertain. February brought with it a brief thaw, turning the snow to slush and making the paths between cabins treacherously muddy. Lucas worked from dawn to dusk, repairing storm damage to fences and outbuildings, often returning to the cabin exhausted and soaked to the skin. One such evening, as Josephine served him stew and fresh bread, she noticed him wince as he reached for his spoon. "You're hurt," she said, concerned. "Just wrenched my shoulder moving that fallen tree." He rotated the joint stiffly. "It'll be fine." Josephine frowned. "Let me look at it." "It's nothing, Lucas Dawson, don't be stubborn. I nursed my husband through consumption for 2 years. I think I can handle a sore shoulder." Reluctantly, Lucas allowed her to examine him. She had him remove his shirt, trying to maintain a professional demeanor as she faced his bare torso. Lucas was lean but powerfully built, his skin tanned from years of outdoor work. A jagged scar ran across his left side, evidence of some past injury. "What happened here?" she asked, her fingers hovering over the scar. "Stampede in '71. Got caught between a steer and a rock wall." Josephine nodded, turning her attention to his shoulder, which was indeed swollen and bruised. "You've strained the muscles badly. You need to rest it." Lucas snorted. "Ranch won't run itself." "Then you'll have to let me help more," she insisted. "I may not know much about ranching, but I'm strong and I learn quickly." "This isn't women's work, Josie. Neither is starving because the ranch fails," she countered. "Let me help, Lucas, please." Their eyes met and something shifted between them. For the first time, Lucas seemed to truly see her not as a stranded woman in need of assistance, but as a partner capable of sharing his burdens. "All right," he conceded. "But we start small, and you follow my instructions exactly." So began a new phase of their relationship. Each morning, after breakfast, Lucas would assign Josephine tasks around the ranch, feeding the chickens and collecting eggs, helping to distribute hay to the nearest cattle, learning to handle the tools in his workshop. He was a patient teacher, explaining each process carefully and praising her quick learning. For her part, Josephine found she enjoyed the physical labor. It was exhausting but satisfying in a way her previous work had never been. There was something deeply rewarding about seeing immediate results from her efforts: animals fed, fences mended, garden beds prepared for spring planting. As February gave way to March, the days grew noticeably longer, and patches of bare ground began to appear on the south-facing slopes. One particularly mild afternoon, Lucas suggested they ride to a nearby ridge that offered views of the entire valley. "You should see what spring looks like coming to the high country," he said. "There's nothing like it." They packed a simple lunch and rode for an hour, climbing steadily through melting snowfields and stands of pine. When they reached the ridge, Josephine gasped at the panorama before her. The valley stretched out below, a patchwork of snow, emerging grass, and the silver thread of a stream swollen with meltwater. In the distance, the Rocky Mountains rose in majestic peaks, still heavily capped with snow. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she said softly. Lucas helped her dismount, and they spread a blanket on a dry patch of ground. As they ate their lunch of cold venison, hard cheese, and biscuits, Josephine found herself thinking of how far she had come, not just in distance but in spirit, since that terrible day in the blizzard. "I've been thinking," Lucas said suddenly, breaking the companionable silence, "about spring." Josephine's heart quickened. "Oh, the agreement was for you to stay until spring, to have time to decide your path." He picked up a pine needle, twirling it between his fingers. "Have you thought about what you'll do?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Josephine had indeed thought about it, had lain awake many nights considering her options. She could seek work in Leadville, perhaps as a teacher or seamstress. She could try to save enough for passage back east, or she could. "I've considered staying," she admitted. "Not necessarily in Leadville, but in Colorado." Lucas looked at her then, his blue eyes intent. "You could stay at the ranch, permanently." Josephine's breath caught. "As your housekeeper?" "No. He set the pine needle aside and turned to face her fully. As my wife. The world seemed to still around them. Even the wind in the pines quieted as if nature itself waited for her response. "Lucas, hear me out," he said quickly. "I know it's not what you came here for. You don't know me well, and I'm not the man you agreed to marry. But these months together, I've come to care for you, Josie, more than I thought possible." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I'm not a poetic man. I can't offer you fine things or an easy life, but I can promise to work every day to make you happy, to build something good with you. This land could be ours, truly ours." Josephine looked down at their joined hands, emotion welling in her throat. "When I came west, I was running from desperation. I agreed to marry a stranger because I had no other choice." She looked up, meeting his gaze steadily. "I don't want to marry out of necessity again, even if that necessity is kinder this time." Lucas's face fell, but he nodded, beginning to withdraw his hand. Josephine tightened her grip, not letting him go. "You didn't let me finish. I don't want to marry from necessity, but I would very much like to marry for love." Her voice softened. "And I do love you, Lucas Dawson. I didn't expect to, but I do." For a moment, Lucas seemed unable to comprehend her words. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming it completely. Without speaking, he leaned forward and kissed her tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. When they broke apart, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too, Josie. Have almost since I found you in that blizzard." They lingered on the ridge until the sun began to sink toward the western peaks, talking of the future, of expanding the ranch, of the home they would build together, of the life they would share. As they rode back, side by side in the golden afternoon light, Josephine felt a certainty she had never known before. She had come west seeking security, but had found something far more precious. A love born not of desperation, but of genuine respect and affection. The following Sunday, they rode into Leadville for the first time since Josephine's arrival. The town was more substantial than she had glimpsed through the blizzard, a bustling mining community with a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, saloons, mercantiles, and even a small opera house. People stared curiously at Josephine as Lucas helped her down from her horse in front of the church, a simple clapboard structure with a modest steeple. "Word gets around," he explained, noting her discomfort at the attention. "Everyone knows Walter's bride arrived, but no one's seen you since." Inside the church, they were greeted warmly by the minister, Reverend Thomas, who expressed sympathy for Josephine's circumstances and pleasure at meeting her at last. After the service, Lucas introduced Josephine to several townspeople, including the widow Mrs. Holloway, who ran the general store, and Dr. Paxton, who had been treating Leadville's residents for nearly a decade. "We'd like to speak with you privately, Reverend," Lucas said as the congregation dispersed, "about arranging a wedding." Reverend Thomas beamed. "I suspected as much when I saw you two together. When would you like to have the ceremony?" They settled on the first Sunday in April, giving them 3 weeks to prepare. After concluding their business with the Reverend, Lucas took Josephine to Mrs. Holloway's store to select fabric for a wedding dress. "Choose whatever you like," he said. "Consider it an engagement present." Mrs. Holloway, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, led Josephine to a shelf displaying the store's finest fabrics. "We just got these in on the last supply train," she said, unfolding a bolt of cream-colored silk. "This would be beautiful with your coloring, dear." As Josephine fingered the luxurious fabric, her eye caught on a different bolt, a soft blue the color of a summer sky. "This one," she said decisively. "It reminds me of something important." Mrs. Holloway looked puzzled, but Lucas smiled, understanding the reference to his eyes. "Blue is a fine color for a bride," he said, "especially one as unconventional as you." They purchased the fabric, along with matching thread, buttons, and enough white lace to trim the bodice and cuffs. While Josephine made these selections, Lucas quietly added other items to their order: sugar, coffee, dried fruits, and a small bottle of real vanilla extract, luxuries they had done without during the winter months. As they prepared to leave the store, a broad-shouldered man with a thick mustache entered, stopping short when he saw Lucas. "Dawson," he said coldly, "didn't expect to see you in town." Lucas's posture stiffened. "Carlton, just attending church and getting supplies." The man's eyes slid to Josephine, narrowing slightly. "This must be Gregory's widow. Heard she was staying out at your place." "Miss Zander is my fiancé," Lucas said evenly. "We're to be married next month." Carlton raised his eyebrows. "Moving mighty fast, aren't you?" "Gregory's barely cold in his grave." Josephine felt her cheeks flush with anger and embarrassment. "Mr. Gregory and I never met, sir. Our arrangement was practical in nature." "And what's the nature of your arrangement with Dawson?" Carlton asked with a sneer. "Practical too." Lucas took a step forward, his face darkening, but Mrs. Holloway intervened. "That's quite enough, Mr. Carlton. You'll not speak to customers that way in my store. Miss Zander is a respectable lady and Mr. Dawson is a good man. I won't have you spreading your bitterness around like manure." Carlton glared at them all but seemed unwilling to challenge the formidable Mrs. Holloway further. With a final contemptuous glance at Lucas, he turned and left the store. "I apologize for that," Mrs. Holloway said once he was gone. "James Carlton has a grudge against half the town, and Lucas in particular." "Why?" Josephine asked as they gathered their purchases. Lucas sighed. "Land dispute. Carlton's ranch borders mine to the north. He claims I fenced off water rights that should be his. Courts ruled in my favor 2 years ago, but he's never accepted it." "Is he dangerous?" Josephine asked as they rode out of town, the encounter having cast a shadow over what had been a pleasant day. "Carlton's more bluster than action," Lucas assured her. "He likes to intimidate, but he knows the law's not on his side. Don't worry about him." Despite his reassurances, Josephine couldn't help feeling unsettled by the man's obvious hostility. It was a reminder that their isolated life at the ranch existed within a wider community with its own tensions and conflicts. The weeks leading up to the wedding flew by in a flurry of preparations. Josephine worked on her dress each evening, carefully cutting and stitching the blue silk into a simple but elegant gown. Lucas, meanwhile, focused on making the main cabin more comfortable for their shared life, building new shelves, repairing the roof, and even constructing a larger bed frame from pine boards. They settled into a new routine, one that acknowledged their changed relationship. Lucas no longer spent evenings alone in his cabin, but joined Josephine for meals and conversation. They would sit before the fire, sometimes reading, sometimes simply talking of their hopes for the future. Occasionally, when the night was clear, they would step outside to look at the stars, standing close together against the mountain chill, Lucas's arm around Josephine's shoulders. It was during one such evening, a week before the wedding, that Lucas brought up a subject they had both been avoiding. "I should tell you about my family," he said quietly as they gazed up at the brilliance of the Milky Way, "before you commit your life to mine." Josephine leaned into his warmth. "You don't have to if it's painful. You should know." He took a deep breath. "My father was a drunk, mean one. Used to beat my mother, my brother, and me whenever the mood struck him, which was often. When I was 16, he nearly killed my brother in one of his rages. That's when I ran away." Josephine slipped her hand into his. "I'm so sorry. My mother died 2 years later." Pneumonia, they said, but I think her heart was just broken. My brother left home after that, went east to Philadelphia. Last I heard, he was working on the docks. Lucas's voice was tight with old pain. I've written to him but never received a reply. And your father? Died in a barroom brawl when I was 24. I didn't go to the funeral. The stars reflected in his eyes as he looked down at Josephine. That's the family you'd be marrying into, not much to recommend it. Josephine reached up to touch his face. You are not your father, Lucas. You've built something good and honest here, that's what matters. He turned his face to kiss her palm. What about your family? You've spoken of your husband, but little of your parents. They were good people, Josephine said softly. Simple, hardworking. My father was a carpenter, my mother a seamstress. They died within weeks of each other during the influenza outbreak of '71. I was 18, newly married to Henry. She smiled sadly. Henry was a schoolteacher, kind, scholarly. We had 2 good years before the consumption took hold. He lasted another 2 after that, though the last year he was more ghost than man. Lucas drew her closer. You've known your share of sorrow. As have you, she replied. Perhaps that's why we recognized something in each other from the beginning. He kissed her then, under the vast canopy of stars. A kiss that promised healing for old wounds and hope for the future they would build together. The day before the wedding, an unexpected visitor arrived at the ranch. Josephine was hanging laundry in the early spring sunshine when she heard the sound of an approaching horse. Looking up, she saw a woman riding a dappled mare, her posture suggesting confidence and long experience in the saddle. The woman reined in her horse and dismounted gracefully. She appeared to be in her early 40s, attractive in a weathered way, with auburn hair streaked with gray and keen hazel eyes. You must be Josephine, the woman said, approaching with an outstretched hand. I'm Rebecca Carlton, James's sister-in-law. Josephine tensed at the name but accepted the handshake. Mrs. Carlton, this is unexpected. I imagine it is, Rebecca said with a wry smile. Especially given my brother-in-law's behavior in town. That's partly why I'm here to apologize for James. He can be a stubborn fool, but he's not a bad man at heart. It's not necessary for you to apologize for him, Josephine said carefully. Perhaps not, but I wanted to meet you regardless. We don't get many new women in these parts, especially not ones brave enough to take on Lucas Dawson. There was a hint of teasing in Rebecca's voice, but it held no malice. Josephine found herself warming to the straightforward woman. Would you like some coffee? Lucas is out checking the herd, but he should be back soon. Over coffee in the cabin, Rebecca explained that she had been widowed 5 years earlier when her husband, James's brother, had been killed in a mining accident. I stayed on at the ranch to help James. He was lost without Thomas. They were twins, very close. James has never been good with people, and losing Thomas made him worse. That explains some things, Josephine said, but not his specific animosity toward Lucas. Rebecca sighed. That's complicated. The water rights dispute is real enough, but there's more to it. Lucas reminds James of Thomas. They have a similar way about them, quiet but determined. I think seeing Lucas succeed where Thomas failed, it's salt in a wound that never healed. I'm sorry for his loss, but that doesn't excuse his behavior. No, it doesn't, Rebecca agreed. And that's not why I came. I came because, regardless of James's feelings, we're going to be neighbors and I'd like us to be friends. She smiled. Also, I heard you're getting married tomorrow, and I thought you might like to have another woman around to help with the preparations. Josephine was touched by the gesture. That's very kind of you. Not entirely selfless, Rebecca admitted. It gets lonely being the only woman on a ranch full of cowhands. I've missed female companionship. By the time Lucas returned, The two women had established the beginnings of what promised to be a genuine friendship. Though Lucas was initially wary of Rebecca's presence, her frank manner and obvious goodwill soon won him over as well. "I've brought a wedding gift," Rebecca said as she prepared to leave, retrieving a package from her saddlebag. "It's not much, but I thought you might like it." Inside was a beautiful handmade quilt, pieced in a pattern of blues and creams that perfectly complemented Josephine's wedding dress. "Rebecca, this is exquisite. You shouldn't have. I enjoy quilting," Rebecca said simply, "and it pleases me to think of it being used by people who appreciate it." She mounted her horse with practiced ease. "I'll see you both at the church tomorrow. And don't worry about James, I'll make sure he behaves himself." The wedding day dawned clear and mild, with the scent of spring in the air. Josephine dressed carefully in her blue silk gown, arranging her dark hair in a simple knot adorned with white wildflowers Rebecca had brought that morning. As she studied her reflection in the small mirror Lucas had hung for her, Josephine hardly recognized herself. The gaunt, frightened woman who had arrived in the blizzard had been replaced by someone stronger, more confident, with color in her cheeks and light in her eyes. Lucas had ridden ahead to the church, leaving Josephine to follow with Rebecca, who had returned to help her prepare. As they rode into Leadville, Josephine was surprised to see how many people had gathered for the ceremony. It seemed the entire town had turned out to witness the marriage of Lucas Dawson and the mail-order bride, who had never reached her intended groom. Inside the church, Lucas waited at the altar, looking uncommonly handsome in a new suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his blue eyes finding Josephine's as soon as she entered. The love and admiration in his gaze as she walked toward him brought tears to her eyes. This was not the wedding she had imagined when she left Boston, but it was infinitely more meaningful. The ceremony was simple and brief. They exchanged vows, promised to love and honor each other, and slipped plain gold bands onto each other's fingers. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed Josephine with a tenderness that belied his usual reserve, drawing appreciative murmurs from the congregation. A celebration followed at the town's hotel, where Mrs. Holloway and other local women had prepared a feast. Even James Carleton attended, offering a stiff but civil congratulation to the couple under his sister-in-law's watchful eye. As the afternoon wore on, Josephine found herself surrounded by well-wishers, many of whom expressed admiration for her courage in starting anew in such challenging circumstances. "You've changed him," Dr. Paxton commented as he offered Josephine a piece of wedding cake. "Lucas, I mean. He's been a solitary man since he came to these parts. Good neighbor, reliable in a crisis, but kept to himself. Never thought I'd see him this happy." "He's changed me too," Josephine replied, watching as Lucas chatted with a group of ranchers across the room. "Given me a home when I had none." As the sun began to set, Lucas and Josephine bid farewell to their guests and rode back to the ranch, now truly their shared home. The evening air was cool but not cold, filled with the scent of pine and the first wildflowers. "Happy, Mrs. Dawson?" Lucas asked as they approached the cabin, its windows glowing with the lamps Rebecca had thoughtfully lit before leaving the celebration. "Very, Mr. Dawson," Josephine replied, leaning against him as they rode double on his horse. That night, as husband and wife, they discovered each other fully for the first time, their coming together both tender and passionate. Afterward, as Josephine lay in Lucas's arms, watching moonlight filter through the cabin window, she felt a profound sense of peace. The journey that had begun in desperation had led her to this moment, this man, this life that now stretched before them full of promise. Spring unfurled across the high country in a riot of wildflowers and fresh green grass. The cattle grew sleek on the new growth, and Lucas's predictions of a good year ahead seemed well-founded. Josephine settled into her role as a rancher's wife with enthusiasm, learning new skills daily and taking pride in the home they were building together. In late May, as they worked side by side planting a vegetable garden, Josephine broached a subject that had been on her mind. "Lucas, what would you think about expanding the ranch someday? Not just more cattle, but a family." Lucas's hands stilled in the earth. "You mean children?" "Yes." Josephine watched his face carefully. "Is that something you want?" A slow smile spread across his features. "More than anything, I just wasn't sure if you—" He trailed off, then admitted, "I wasn't sure if I'd be a good father given my own." Josephine touched his arm. "You'll be a wonderful father, Lucas. You're nothing like the man who raised you." His hand covered hers, soil-stained fingers intertwining. "Then yes, I'd like that very much." Summer brought long days of hard work and simple pleasures. Lucas and Josephine established routines that suited them both, rising with the sun, working through the cool morning hours, resting during the heat of the day, then continuing until dusk. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch Lucas had built, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. Their circle of acquaintances widened. Rebecca Carlton became a regular visitor, often bringing books or news from town. To everyone's surprise, James Carlton's hostility gradually softened, particularly after Lucas helped him track down rustlers who had been preying on both their herds. By midsummer, the two men had reached an uneasy truce, reinforced by a formal agreement on water rights that benefited both ranches. In August, Josephine confirmed what she had suspected for weeks. She was expecting a child. Lucas's joy at the news was boundless. He immediately set to work expanding the cabin, adding a proper bedroom for themselves and a smaller one for the baby, improving the kitchen, and building furniture suitable for a growing family. "You don't have to do everything at once," Josephine laughed as he outlined plans for a cradle. "We have months yet." "I want everything to be perfect," Lucas insisted. "You and the baby deserve the best home I can provide." As autumn painted the aspen groves in shades of gold, Josephine's body changed with her advancing pregnancy. She remained active, though Lucas insisted she rest more frequently and avoid the heavier ranch work. Rebecca proved invaluable during this time, sharing her knowledge of childbirth and infant care, gained from her own experience as a mother to a son now grown and living in Denver. "You're lucky to have Lucas," Rebecca said one afternoon as they sat knitting baby clothes. "Not all men in these parts take to fatherhood with such enthusiasm." "He's making up for his own childhood," Josephine observed, "determined to be everything his father wasn't." Rebecca nodded. "That's often the way. The best fathers I've known were those who had the worst examples." Winter returned to the high country, bringing snow and cold winds, but this time Josephine faced it without fear. The cabin was snug and well-provisioned, and the presence of Lucas beside her each night made even the fiercest blizzard seem distant and harmless. On a clear, cold day in January 1880, Josephine went into labor. Lucas rode through fresh snow to fetch Rebecca and Dr. Paxton from town, returning with them just as Josephine's pains intensified. The hours that followed tested her endurance as never before, but with Rebecca's calm guidance and Lucas's unwavering support, she endured. As dawn broke on the following day, their son was born, a healthy, lusty boy with a thatch of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. They named him Thomas Henry Dawson, honoring both Rebecca's late husband and Josephine's first love. "He's perfect," Lucas whispered, cradling his son with tears in his eyes. "Josie, he's absolutely perfect." Dr. Paxton pronounced both mother and child in excellent health before departing with promises to return in a week to check on them. Rebecca stayed longer, helping Josephine establish nursing and showing Lucas how to change and swaddle the infant. "I'll leave you three to become acquainted," she said finally, gathering her things. "But I expect regular reports on my honorary nephew." Alone with her new family, Josephine watched as Lucas carefully placed their sleeping son in the cradle he had crafted with such care. Then he sat beside her on the bed, taking her hand in his. "I never thought I could be this happy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "When I found you in that blizzard, I was just trying to do the right thing. I had no idea you would become my whole world." Josephine reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that a year of smiles had etched around his eyes. "When I came west, I was seeking safety, security. I never dreamed I would find love like this." Lucas leaned down to kiss her, a kiss full of tenderness and promise. "Stay forever," he whispered against her lips. "Not just through spring, but for all the seasons of our lives." "Forever," Josephine agreed, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had rescued her from the storm and given her a home, a family, and a future bright with hope. Outside, snow fell gently on the mountain ranch, covering the land in a blanket of pristine white. But inside the cabin, warmth and love prevailed, creating a haven against the wilderness, a place where a chance encounter in a blizzard had blossomed into a love story for all seasons. The years that followed brought both joys and challenges to the Dawson family. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's quiet determination and his mother's quick intelligence. When he was 2, a sister joined the family, Sarah Rebecca Dawson, named for Lucas's mother and their dear friend. She was fair where Thomas was dark, with Josephine's delicate features and a spirit as wild as the mountain winds. The ranch prospered under Lucas and Josephine's joint stewardship. By the time Thomas was 5, they had doubled their herd and added a small apple orchard that promised to bear fruit in the coming years. Josephine had also established a reputation in Leadville for her preserved foods and handcrafted textiles, which she sold through Mrs. Holloway's store. In the spring of 1886, as they prepared to celebrate their 7th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Josephine with news that would change their lives once more. "I've been offered a position on the town council," he said as they sat on the porch after the children were asleep. "They want someone to represent the interests of the ranchers in the area." Josephine squeezed his hand. "That's wonderful, Lucas. You'd be perfect for it." He looked uncertain. "It would mean more time in town, more responsibilities beyond the ranch." "And more opportunities for all of us," Josephine pointed out. "Thomas will be ready for school soon. This could be good timing." After careful consideration, Lucas accepted the position. His natural integrity and fairness quickly earned him respect among both the townspeople and his fellow ranchers. Within 2 years, he was being mentioned as a potential candidate for mayor, though he consistently demurred, preferring to focus on specific issues rather than seeking higher office. Josephine, meanwhile, had found her own place in the community. She helped establish Leadville's first lending library, taught sewing classes for young women, and became known for organizing aid when illness or disaster struck local families. The frightened widow who had arrived in a blizzard had become a pillar of the community, respected and beloved. In the summer of 1889, a letter arrived that reopened a chapter of Lucas's past he had long considered closed. His brother Michael, from whom he had not heard in over 20 years, wrote from Philadelphia, explaining that he had only recently discovered Lucas's whereabouts through a chance encounter with a former Leadville miner. "He wants to visit," Lucas said, his voice tight with emotion as he handed Josephine the letter. Says he's been searching for me for years. How do you feel about it? Josephine asked gently. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, now liberally streaked with gray. I don't know. We were close as boys before. Everything happened. But it's been so long. Then perhaps it's time, Josephine suggested. For closure, if nothing else. When Michael Dawson arrived in Leadville that autumn, the resemblance between the brothers was striking despite the years of separation. Michael was slightly shorter, his face less weathered, but they shared the same blue eyes and strong jawline. The reunion was initially awkward, both men weighed down by unspoken memories and the specter of their shared past. But the presence of Thomas and Sarah, curious about this newfound uncle, helped bridge the gap. Michael, it turned out, had married and had 3 children of his own. He had built a successful business as a shipwright in Philadelphia, and had indeed been searching for Lucas for years, stymied by his brother's frequent moves and name changes in his early wandering days. I should have tried harder, Michael admitted as the brothers sat alone by the fire one night after the children were in bed, and Josephine had tactfully withdrawn to give them privacy. After Mother died, I was angry at Father, at the world, even at you for leaving. I shouldn't have gone without you, Lucas said, the guilt he had carried for decades finally finding voice. I've thought about that every day since. Michael shook his head. You were 16, Lucas. What could you have done? Taken a child on the run with you. We both survived. We both found our way eventually. By the time Michael departed 2 weeks later, the brothers had forged a new bond, not the seamless connection of their childhood, but something honest and hopeful. They promised to write regularly, and Michael extended an invitation for Lucas and his family to visit Philadelphia the following summer. Your brother is a good man, Josephine said as they watched Michael's train pull away from the Leadville station. You both are. Despite everything, despite your father, you both became good men. Lucas's arm tightened around her shoulders. Because of you, he said. You helped me believe I could be more than my past. Josephine shook her head. No, Lucas, you were already a good man when you found me in that blizzard. I just helped you see it. The visit to Philadelphia the following summer was an eye-opening experience for the entire family. Thomas and Sarah, who had known only the mountains and wide open spaces of Colorado, were initially overwhelmed by the bustling city with its crowded streets and towering buildings. But they quickly adapted, forming fast friendships with their cousins and developing a fascination with the ships that crowded Philadelphia's busy harbor. For Josephine, who had not returned east since her departure, the visit stirred complex emotions. She insisted on making a side trip to Boston, where she visited Henry's grave and the humble church where they had married. Standing there, with Lucas beside her, she felt the final threads of her old life being gently laid to rest. Thank you for bringing me here, she said as they left the cemetery. I needed to say goodbye properly. Lucas nodded, understanding in his eyes. He was part of your journey, part of what made you the woman I love. The family returned to Colorado in late August, enriched by new connections but grateful for the familiar beauty of their mountain home. Life settled back into its comfortable rhythms. The children returned to school. Lucas divided his time between the ranch and his council duties, and Josephine continued her community work while managing the household. As the century drew to a close, bringing with it new inventions and changing times, the Dawson Ranch remained a haven of stability and love. Thomas, now 20, had inherited his father's affinity for ranching and was beginning to take on more responsibility for the daily operations. Sarah, at 18, showed a scholarly bent and dreamed of attending college in Denver, a plan her parents fully supported, having set aside money for their children's education over the years. On a crisp autumn evening in 1899, as Josephine and Lucas sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Lucas took her hand in his. 20 years ago, I found a half-frozen woman in a blizzard, he said, his voice soft with memory. I told her to stay through spring at least. Josephine smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. Her dark hair was threaded with silver now, but her eyes were as bright as ever. Best advice I ever took. Any regrets? Lucas asked. About staying, about the life we've built. Josephine considered the question seriously, as was her way. She thought of the difficult years, the drought that had nearly ruined them in 83, the scarlet fever that had swept through the town in 90, taking friends and neighbors, the political battles Lucas had fought on the council, the everyday struggles of raising children and maintaining a ranch in this beautiful but unforgiving land. Then she thought of the joys Thomas's first steps across the cabin floor, Sarah's delighted laughter as Lucas taught her to ride, the community they had helped build, the love that had grown between them year by year, deepening like a river cutting through stone. Not one, she said finally, her voice firm with certainty. Every moment, every struggle, every joy, it's all been exactly as it should be. Lucas lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her fingers. I've loved you through 20 winters, Josie. I'll love you through 20 more, if we're granted them. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared above the mountains, Josephine Dawson looked at the man beside her, older now, his face lined with the years, but still the same man who had found her in the snow and offered her shelter. The man who had taught her that love could be built slowly, day by day, through shared work and mutual respect. The man who had given her a home when she had nothing, and a life richer than any she could have imagined. Forever, she whispered, echoing the promise they had made on the day their son was born. Not just through spring, but for all the seasons of our lives. And as the night descended on the Colorado mountains, bringing with it the promise of another dawn, another day, another year together, Lucas and Josephine Dawson held fast to each other, their love a beacon as enduring as the peaks that surrounded them, a testament to the unexpected journey that had begun on a snowy day more than 20 years before, when a mail-order bride arrived in a blizzard and a cowboy said, "Stay through spring, at least."